Well, it's hard to believe, but it's already October 7th, 2021 at 4 o'clock. So I'm going to call this Lacey City Council meeting to order. First up is our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just as a quick note, we have a couple council members who have excused absences tonight. Councilmember Lenny Greenstein and Councilmember Michael Stedman are not with us this evening. With that, we also have a agenda and consent agenda items before us. I don't think there's any changes, so can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve the agenda and the consent agenda as published.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Oh, there's one correction. I might as well get out of the way right now. Under standing general committees, it shows the transportation committee, and that report was already given. And so we won't give that report again here tonight. But with that, there's a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion carries and we've approved the agenda and consent agenda items. Our first item on our approved agenda is public recognitions and presentations. And we do have a presentation from our Lacey Youth Mayor, Justin, and good seeing you, Justin. I will turn this Lacey's, we'll turn it over to you to give you the report for the Lacey Youth Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, and members of the City Council. My name is Justin Begley. I am a student at Timberline High School. I am a junior, and I also serve as the mayor of the Lacey Youth Council. Over our 2 months together as a youth council, we have tried to develop a list of priorities of what we believe is a problem within our community. We have developed 3 on our list. Those are the top 3. The top 3 would be climate change, litter, and homelessness. The Youth Council believes that these are the major issues within our community and that they should be addressed as soon as possible. Thank you very much for having me, and I hope you guys enjoy your day.
Thank you, Mayor. Really appreciate it. The Deputy Mayor and myself are part of the Lacey Youth Council meetings, and it's been really awesome to see this young group of leaders come together and give back to their community like they are. I know they're developing a whole work program, and we look forward to working with you to help you achieve that work plan as this school year goes on. So it's good seeing you. Take it easy. Okay, next up on our agenda is public comments on items not on the agenda. We didn't receive any verbal public comments for anyone sign up for public comment, verbal public comments today, but we did receive several written public comments, and that will be included in the packet, so it will be part of the record going forward. After this, we're next into resolutions. The resolution 1108, the standards, protocols, and ground rules handbook for Lacey boards and commissions. And I'll turn this back over to Kelly.
Right. Good afternoon, or excuse me, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for making time for us this evening to talk about the boards and commissions handbook. So as many of you know, the handbook was created in 2015 to ensure that appointed representatives from the community operate with the same standards and protocols used by council. And your standards and protocols, of course, are outlined in the Policies and Procedures Manual, which we recently updated. So normally this document is updated by the General Government and Public Safety Committee. So if we have changes, we go to the committee and request them. And since the last update was made in 2018, we definitely needed a change. So this new draft improves readability, accessibility, and inclusivity, and it also incorporates the addition of the Commission on Equity, the Lacey Youth Council, and we increased the number of Board of Parks commissioners, which was recently changed. And we have some appendices, so some additional information on the guidance that boards and commissions have created for themselves that builds upon the handbook. So in your packet, we have a staff report which generalizes what we're recommending, 2 drafts of the update. One is redlined, so you can see in detail what has changed, and one is a final clean product, so you can see the outcome that we're recommending. And the draft resolution 1108, which formally adopts this draft as the new version. So these updates were reviewed and approved by the General Government and Public Safety Committee in August. And our staff recommendation is to adopt resolution 1108. Thank you.
Can I get a motion, please?
I move that we approve resolution 1108, which approves updates to the standards, protocols, and ground rules handbook for Lacey boards and commissions.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Well, I'm just going to chime in here and say that the whole reason why we have this ground rules handbook is because of our deputy mayor, who noticed that we didn't have normal protocols within our boards and commissions, and said that's something that we should definitely have. And so this is a result of the deputy mayor's wisdom. And so I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the deputy mayor for advising this council on this is something that's needed, and it has been something that's needed. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, deputy mayor. It's really appreciated. Is there any other discussion?
I remember it all.
Seeing none, then there's a motion, a second to approve resolution 1108. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Then that motion carries. We'll update our ground rules and handbook for Lacey boards and commissions. Thank you, Kelly. So moving right along, under the mayor's report, I do have 2 recommendations for tonight. I move that we appoint Kamber and Wendy Goodwin to the Board of Park Commissioners. This is as a result of us expanding the Board of Park Commissioners, and these are 2 amazing candidates who actually, because of these 2 great candidates, is one of the reasons why I started realizing, boy, we needed to expand our Board of Park Commissioners to really better represent the entire city of Lacey. And at the time, of course, we didn't have these extra 2 positions, and so it's because of these 2 great candidates that was really one of the impetus for looking at expanding the Board of Park Commissioners. And so that is my recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Kamber and Wendy Goodwin to the Board of Park Commissioners. Is there any further discussion? I think we do have Kamber here in the audience. I'm not sure if we can, if you want to bring your, she's willing to come in and just introduce herself to the, I think a lot of people know Kamber, actually. She's been pretty active in our community. Kamber, do you want to just quick introduce yourself to the City Council?
Hello, everyone. I'm Kamber Good. I am a mom in the city of Lacey. I'm also serving on the Gold Star Memorial Foundation of Lacey board. I'm a local military family and a Gold Star family. I'm eager and excited to participate in the board and ensure that our parks serve our community and all of our families. Thank you guys for this opportunity.
Thank you, Kamber.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Then it's been moved and seconded to appoint Kamber and Wendy Goodwin to the Board of Park Commissioners. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Is there any opposed? Then that motion carries. Thank you. Good seeing you, Kamber.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. So next, we're going into boards, commissions, and committee reports. Moving quite along. I'm up first. The Mayor's Forum did meet the first Friday of this month, and there's several things that are going on in the county. One of the things that we were talking about, which this council is well aware of, is looking at the home fund, and we had a conversation about that. And so, but other than that, another thing that was pointed out is that we're getting near the end of this year, and two of our mayors who've been, part of the Mayor's Forum for quite a long time are retiring at the end of this year, Pete Komet and J.W. Foster. And so the mayors are trying to get together to celebrate those two amazing public servants to our communities. And so we talked a little bit about when we can get together and have that celebration. But other than that, the Transportation Policy Board meets tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. bright and early. And that is my report. I'll turn it over to the Deputy Mayor.
So the Joint Animal Services Commission met on the 4th of October, which is Monday. And first up was an announcement by Doug Howie that the Thurston County, I should say, Humane Society representative on the board. He's retiring as of that meeting, and temporarily Dick, and I think his last name was Wynn, is going to step in, but the Humane Society will appoint their own representative, permanent one. So Doug has been there, gosh, I don't know how long. I want to say 20 years. I have no idea, but very long time. So that was sad. We had a discussion about our jurisdictional assessments for 2022, and without full service to Thurston County, it would our assessment would be 316,801 for Lacey, and if we get full service to Thurston County, it's 341,525 thousand. So they're still trying to figure out with the commissioners, the Thurston County commissioners, whether they can afford the full service or not. And part of our assessment includes a cybersecurity thing with Lacey, so that we're covered. So we also then talked about how we Subaru, what's called Subaru Loves event, and we're participating in the Subaru adoption for the month of October. And Hanson Subaru will be promoting our adoptable pets on social media. Subaru will also be donating $100 to Joint Animal Services for every dog or cat adopted during the month, up to $3,100. And last year it was really a great success. So we're hoping that it'll be the same this year. We also received a grant for $5,000 for Best Friends Animal Society for life-saving work for behavior dogs. And then we also had an update that the city of Lacey is working on the RFP to repair the plumbing of the indoor pipes that we needed. And Jazz will bring forth the budget amendment once the RFP is complete for a final estimate. And then staff is also, they're also recruiting 3 positions: field services officer, rescue foster specialist, which is an animal transport driver, and a 75% animal care technician. And all of those are being recruited because of promotions within JASCOM that left those positions vacant. And we also talked about the issue of if we filling the veterinarian board position and finalize that. And if we go ahead with the filling the nonprofit position, what would be required? And that's my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Cox.
Okay, I have two reports tonight. The first is on Intercity Transit Authority, which met last night. We set public hearings for 5:30 p.m. on November 3rd on the 2022 budget and on our 2022 through 2027 strategic plan. We also declared some of our van pool vans as surplus. These are the ones that have reached the end of their scheduled use. And typically Intercity Transit calls for proposals from social service organizations to make application to receive one of these vans. So if there are people from those organizations listening tonight, those applications are due on October 13th, and you can find the information on how to apply on the Intercity website. They're also recruiting for members to serve on the Community Advisory Committee, which is kind of an unusual group because most transit authorities don't have a citizens group that advises them, but they get the same board packets that we get, and they provide feedback on all kinds of issues to us. So if you're interested in that, same path forward, and that deadline is coming up on October 8th. And that is the main highlights from that. And then I need to report on the September 22nd meeting of the Regional Housing Council. One of the key things that the council voted to do was, provided no other funding sources are available, to recommend that the county fill the gap in funding for the structure that they're building where the old foam factory was on Martin Way. This will be used as temporary shelter until the Unity Commons shelter at 2828 Martin Way opens. And then it will be converted into a community care center, much like the one that had happened downtown until COVID hit. So that gap it's not a lot of money that they're talking about. I think it was about $187,000, but when we're talking about social services and the like, every penny counts there. We also agreed that the county should let out a request for proposals for hotel, how do we say this? It's state funding that the county is eligible for, and we get up to 1.6 this year, and it helps pay for hotel stays for unhoused people. We also adopted a stretch goal of 150 more units of permanent supportive housing, with a plan on how that is to happen. And I think council pretty much got an update already about the City of Olympia and Thurston County's plan to relocate some of the RVs that have been parking on Ensign Road in Olympia, and park about 20 of them at the property that the county owns at Martin Way and Carpenter Road. And again, these would be from the county manager's lips, about 20 people, mostly senior citizens, people who are the least likely to cause trouble is the way, and he described that.
Scott, you have something to add to this? I know you're going to give an announcement. Might as well give it right now since it's pertaining to this issue.
Sure. As mentioned, there's going to be a virtual town hall meeting on October 14th. It appears from 5:30 to 6:30. That's the same time as we have a work session. I guess it'd be my recommendation that the council at least provide some formal comment regarding the site. If it's okay with the council, we will draft a letter. I could work with the mayor, but it would be on behalf of the city council, and we would at least look at the draft on our work session night. We'll put that on our agenda. That should still give us enough time if we chose the mayor to then go to that virtual town hall and actually read those comments into the record.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. And, Scott and I talked about this, and I think it's appropriate. We'll go over that letter next Thursday at the work session. And then if I have to bail out from the meeting a little bit early to give that testimony, I'll do that. But I look forward to having more of that conversation with the full council next Thursday.
Absolutely. And that's basically my report.
Thank you. Councilmember Miller.
Just a couple reports. TRPC met on the October 1st, Friday. Some of the highlights from there are our electrical vehicle usage and our electrical vehicle infrastructure that we currently have. Right now, we are showing a growth in electrical vehicles from 2017 to 2021, starting at 683 and currently at 2,166 registered electrical vehicles. In the state of Washington, as a whole, it's almost grown by 4 times. In January of 2017, the state had 22,682 electrical vehicles, and currently, as of January, there are 65,888. So, as you know, the amount of people buying electrical vehicles grows, we're of course going to have to increase our infrastructure, and so plans are being laid out to do that. As you guys have seen throughout all around town here, some of those spaces that are not being used as readily and heavily for parking are being converted to electric vehicle charging stations. I did pose a question about solar. Are we going to be drawing from conventional sources, or are we going to try to go green on some of these? I'll have to get an answer back to you guys on that when I get an answer to that question. Another report that I have is the LTAC, and we opened up funds for people to have their events in the city. We funded almost all of them, except for 2 of them we wanted some clarification on because they were events that were not in the city limits of Lacey. And so we had a hard time, giving a yes to those events, even though, the part of the presentation was that, these are going to put some heads in beds in Lacey. Well, we just kind of wanted to revisit a couple of those to see if we can get those events to be in Lacey as well, because, if that's the case, and we're funding events in other cities, and make no mistake, we do some things in other cities that have regional draw, like Washington Center. We just kind of wanted to sharpen up on a couple of these events and make sure that we're doing the right thing. That is my report.
Thank you. Thank you. And Councilmember Kamber.
Thank you, Mayor. The Economic Development Council met the 22nd last month. We received a quick update on our annual audit, and there are no particular issues at this point. Our board is formalizing a plan for an upcoming retreat on the 27th. There will be more to follow on that. And we had a brief mention of the approved federal grant from the EDA for our Lacey Makerspace. which is good news. The Lacey Chamber had a forum yesterday. The highlight of the meeting was our candidate introduction for Lacey Council candidates. On a personal note, every last one of you all that were up there did a fine job. I was impressed. SWAC met also yesterday, and the highlight of the meeting was a presentation of the statewide plastic ban, and we have ratified our updated bylaws for the board. So that is my report.
Thank you. Well, that was a quick council meeting, but hold on. We're not over. We are going to adjourn right into a work session to talk about our 2022 budget workshop. And so we're going to do that right now. I'm going to adjourn this meeting and we'll go straight into our work session. Turn it over to Scott and Troy.
So thank you, Mayor and City Council. Just to start off, as you know, we have a practice of coming to council prior to our main budget presentation and go over key items in the budget to make sure that we're meeting your priorities and your needs, and to go through those items and get final budget direction as we complete the budget process. So as usual, we're going to have Troy kind of go through the major items. I'll insert myself as appropriate and then get final direction from council on the 2022 budget process.
Great, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Council. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, hopefully you can see my presentation.
Yep.
So welcome to the 10th annual budget workshop. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for 10 years, but happy to be here. Give you the agenda for tonight. We're going to talk about revenues and expenditure assumptions. We'll give you a broad oversight of the major initiatives that are included in the budget. We do have some workforce considerations, and at this point I'll turn that over to City Manager. He'll continue with the budget summary, and then we'll wrap things up with seeking very specific direction from the council just to make sure that some of the major items within the budget meet your vision and your initiatives going forward. So let's talk about the 2022 revenue assumptions. We are going to focus on the general fund and really just kind of focus on the major sources of revenue for the general fund. So you really can't talk about revenues for the general fund unless you talk about sales tax. This is our single largest source of revenue for the general fund. The 2022 projection is about $14.2 million. This is almost $2.6 million higher than the adopted 2021 budget. When we talk about this increase, and I apologize for the typo there, I could see that we got an extra digit there at the end, but it is about 2.5 million in addition. When we talk about this increase, it's a combination of a conservative projection for 2021, just because of the uncertainty with the pandemic. You think about where we were this time last year, we didn't have a vaccine. Still really weren't sure where COVID was going to go in terms of its economic impact. So we were conservative. And it's also an acknowledgement that sales taxes have been coming in higher than expected. So a very sizable increase of just over $2.5 million for 2022. This is equal to about 23.7% of total general fund revenues. While it is the single largest source of revenue, it does really represent just a fraction of the entire general fund revenues. One comment is we look at the projection, we are expecting a weaker new construction segment than what we've seen in the past 3 years. And there's some unknown economic impacts. Here we are a year later, still really not sure about the path of the COVID pandemic. We are hopefully we're seeing the signs of the end of the fifth wave, but all of our economic indicators do not really include any of the numbers that are associated with when the fifth wave started. So if you think about when this fifth wave started, it was about August, maybe end of July. We have only seen the July sales tax. We have yet to see August and September. So that's still a bit of an unknown. We do also have a number of expiring financial supports at the federal level. The extra unemployment expired in September. Utility liens for most utilities ended at the end of September. Of course, the City of Lacey's moratorium on utility penalties and liens does not expire until the end of the year. It coincides with the declaration of emergency for the city. And at the present moment, the eviction moratorium for rental properties expires at the end of October. So there are a number of items that still have yet to impact the economy. So I do want to kind of really drill down on a couple different areas of sales tax. First, I want to cover just overall retail sales tax. And if you look at 2021, I think I certainly wouldn't have predicted the level of sales tax we're collecting. You would think in the midst of a pandemic that we would see declines, but of course, I think the various financial aid that is available to citizens is certainly impacting this. I think there is an element of forced local shopping. If you think about just people's movement, people not traveling outside of Lacey to work. So I think there's been an increase to local shopping because of the pandemic. So if you look at 2020, you can see that we are collecting sales tax overall at a higher level than 2020. Of course, we did see sales tax drop at the very beginning of the pandemic, and then you could see there in April, it really bounced back. And again, I think that's really due to the kind of restrictions that we all had in terms of traveling and shopping outside of our home community. Here's 2019. So you can really see that 2020, 2019, of course, if you compare month to month, there's really no comparison, but overall, sales tax is pretty comparable overall to those 2 years. 2019 was a very strong construction year. In fact, the strongest construction we've seen in Lacey's history. So in 2020, we're seeing construction decline, but the increase to some of the local retail has offset that. Here's 2018 in yellow. This was really kind of the beginning of the most recent construction boom. And then 2017, which we were kind of in between two different construction booms, and overall sales tax was staying pretty steady. So I do want to talk about two very specific categories within sales tax. And of course, we're going to talk about construction based on the comments I had on a previous slide. So here is the 2021 year-to-date collections from construction. It is a down year so far, but that was indeed expected. Here you can see 2020. 2020 was lower than 2019 by about $300,000. So you could see towards the end of 2020, that construction started to decline. Here's 2019, the record year. You could see really towards the end of the year, construction really took off. In 2019, we collected about $2 million alone from new construction. Here in yellow is 2018. Again, this was kind of the beginning of the most recent construction boom. I do like to show what I would call the trough in terms of the last 15 years of construction. So 2010 here in blue at the bottom of the chart, that is the lowest collections of sales tax in the last 15 years of new construction. Then here's 2007. That was the last big construction boom that Lacey experienced, and that was the single-family home boom of 2005, 6, and 7. So in terms of overall collections for construction, you can see them on screen. And again, 2019 was a record year. Collected at just over $2 million from new construction. Again, 2010 was the trough. We only collected $328,000 of sales tax in that year. And then 2021, so far year to date, so that would be through July, we've collected about $827,000 in sales tax from new construction. So it's continuing that downward trend in terms of collections from new construction.
So where do you think we'll be at into the year then?
I think it's going to come in around 1.2, 1.3, would be my guess, based on kind of the current trajectory.
Okay. Which is about what it was at our peak in 2007.
Correct. We've got a couple more slides I think will help provide a little more information and kind of follow up to your question, Mr. Mayor. This is a chart that shows total sales tax collections for the last 15 years with the red section highlighted being the construction sales tax dollars. And again, 2019 is our peak year. We collected about $2 million. During 2019, that made up 15% of all sales tax collected. And then you could see during the 2010s, that is, during the Great Recession, we had a very slow recovery during that period. Construction really bottomed out. Again, 2010 was the trough where we collected $328,000 worth of sales tax. That was only equal to 4% of all sales tax. So basically a 10% difference in terms of collections compared to the overall sales tax collections.
So Troy, when you talk about construction, are we talking about warehouse construction or commercial overall, or what?
This last boom was definitely industrial. So that was Northeast Lacey. There was during the beginning of this most recent boom, there was the school district bonds, capital projects that were expended. We had some dollars in the Woodland Square area, but it was primarily Northeast Lacey that caused this the spike in construction.
In multifamily housing.
That's correct. Good point. So in the past, we've used single family home permits as our economic indicator. I think we're definitely beyond that just because of the slowdown we've seen. And so wanted to show a little bit different information this year that's, I think, a much better indicator of where construction is going to go. So this is the last 10 years of permit issues. So in the red line, that is the total number of permits issued for multifamily, commercial, industrial, and single family homes. And then in the blue bars, that is the permit valuation totals per year. And you can really see what happened in 2018-19, where we had, that's really where we started to see the shift from residential to industrial. So the number of permits came down, but the valuation really went up. You also, if you look at 2016, as the mayor just pointed out, that was during that year, we had our first apartment complex permit since 2008. So we went 8 years without a significant multifamily building permit. So that began in 2008. We saw also in 2018 and 19 a number of multifamily permits. But you could see the downward trend. 2020, a big drop off from 2019, both in terms of number of permits and valuation. So we, in 2020, for that entire year, we issued about $126 million in permits. Year to date, 2021, we're about at 88 million in total valuation. Just using a straight line projection, I think we're going to be just under the valuation that we issued in 2020. And what's interesting when you look at this trend and where we are today, if you look at how much retail activity it takes to generate $1 million in sales tax, that is about $119 million in activity. So in terms of 2020 and where I think we may end up in 2021, that's right at $1 million in potential construction activity, which would be about $1 million drop off from our peak in 2019. Again, we collected about $2 million. So potentially we'll see $1 million drop in sales tax construction. Also want to focus in on general merchandise. We've seen these slides in the past, so these are really just updates for the council. But what's significant about general merchandise stores is it is the single biggest sales tax category for the city of Lacey. So kind of using the same color scheme, we have 2021 year to date, 2020 in red. So as you know from the monthly reports, we are seeing increases in this category compared to 2020. And again, I will admit that I am surprised to see that, or at least from where I thought we were at the beginning of the pandemic. 2019's collections, and you can see we're pretty similar to 2020. And you're going to see the trend here. 2018, very similar. 2017, again, 16, even going back to 2010 here in light blue, a very tight grouping within this category in terms of collections. And then I threw in 2007 just because that was our last previous sales tax boom. You can see a really tight grouping. That really tells you that the kind of an indication of the shopping habits of our citizens. So if you look at the total sales tax growth from 2020, which is our last full year represented here on the chart, back to 2007, it's about a $260,000 increase over that 13, 14-year period. That's equal to 13% increase over that period. If you look at the population growth over that same period, the population growth was 47.5%. So we've all, I think, kind of wondered, why doesn't sales tax grow with population growth? And we've talked about just kind of the nature of our shopping options in Lacey. We're more of a less discretionary type of shopping here in Lacey, so we don't see that growth. And the good news is we don't see the growth, or we don't see the drop-offs during those economic cycles.
But we have seen the growth this year.
We sure do, and I have a couple slides that will indicate that. So you've also seen this slide in the past, and of course it's updated to include the last full year, which is 2020, and this is the per capita general merchandise collections. And you can see it's been very steady over this 10-year period. Again, I would say the conclusion is the population that we've added over this period, which is during the 10-year period, is about 10,000 people. I think the same shopping habits are certainly shown or indicated here in the slide. As the mayor indicated, we are seeing something different in 2021. So with this slide, what I've done here is I've added 2021. Of course, the year is not complete. We still have 5 more months of sales tax collections to see. But I took 2021's OFM population of 54,780. And what I did here is I extrapolated out growth for this category through the end of the year. Year to date, we're 11% higher than last year. So I just took that 11%, extrapolated that through December, and redid the calculation, the per capita calculation. You can see that jumped up to $45.83. So, what's the conclusion here? Again, I think the conclusion is we have federal stimulus and other aid out there that's helping keep the local economy going. I think it indicates that local shopping is higher because of just some of the restrictions we see. So if you look at that previous slide, over that 10-year period, we saw very little change in terms of the per capita. That tells me that 10,000 people that we added during that period had the same shopping habits. but I don't think that the last 2,000 or so population that came in the last couple of years have completely different shopping habits. In other words, that last kind of stair step of population, they're not doing all their shopping here in Lacey. So I think what I'm trying to say is I think that some of this recent growth in this category is likely temporary.
So can you overlay the online shopping?
I cannot.
because I would argue with you here. I think that it isn't temporary. I think that people have changed their shopping habits, right? I mean, people were, and I feel bad for the brick and mortar because they've been hurt really bad. But I think what we've seen during this time is that people are now shopping from home. And I don't think those shopping habits are going to change when COVID is over. I think people have gotten used to shopping at home and that they're going to continue to do that. And now with the addition of our population, they're also shopping from home. And that's why you're seeing this increase, is because people have changed their shopping habits.
Right. So there's two main categories that we see collections from online sales. The year to date on both of those categories are up. So they're not in this general merchandise category. So if you look at miscellaneous store retailers, which probably includes the majority of the online stores, it's up 34% over last year. If you look at non-store retailers, it's up just under 23% over last year. We are seeing some change here recently, and it coincides with the the Washington Safe Start plan, because we did see online sales drop right in July. Actually, they didn't drop, but the growth trend definitely changed in July when the economy fully opened on, I believe, June 30th. In fact, if you look at non-store retailers for last month, which would have been July, it actually dropped 3%. So I do agree with you, Mayor, that it is. We've definitely seen some change of habits in terms of how people are shopping, but that online sales is not reflected in this general merchandise chart. So I mean, that's a completely different trend line we could look at. But I think one of my conclusions also is if you look at the nature of our shopping, which is you think big box store that has a combination of groceries and other general retail and electronics, clothing, they're kind of one-stop shops. And I think that's where the shift occurred, is that especially when the pandemic first started, those were stores that had no closures throughout the pandemic. And not only could you buy groceries, but you could also buy other general merchandise while you were there, where a department store or a mall was completely closed at the onset of the pandemic.
I have a question.
Yes.
Population wise, do we track daytime population versus evening population?
We do not. I could speak anecdotally or my opinion. I think that Lacey's daytime population normally would drop. I think that our residents leave to go to work. That's also possibly in these numbers as well. Many people are working from home. I have several neighbors that have only gone into the office, 6 times in the last 18 months. And there is the old saying, you shop where you work as well. So that could certainly be in this number too. I don't know if that's what you were asking specifically, Councilmember Miller.
Close enough.
Yeah, I do think that's changed. I think the daytime population is probably a lot higher than it was in years past.
Agreed.
Yeah. The next slide is kind of a continuation. I think it continues in terms of could be consistent with the conclusion. This is This is a chart that we update each year, and it shows the per capita sales tax, and it's a comparison with our neighbors. And of course, we include the top 3 in the state in terms of sales tax generation. Lacey stayed relatively the same in terms of comparison to 2019. Lacey was 74th ranking. Of course, we are the 24th largest city in the state, so we're not collecting, we're collecting sales tax at a much lower rate than you would expect based on population. Olympia stayed relatively the same. They were 32nd last year. Tumwater made a bit of a jump. I mean, they're right behind Olympia now. They were 40th in terms of per capita sales tax generation in 2019. But Yale made the big jump. They were 93rd back in 2019. Then here you could see the per capita generation in 2019. Interestingly enough, Olympia and Lacey both had their per capita sales tax calculation go down, where Tumwater and Yelm went up, which obviously makes sense that they made some pretty decent jumps in the rankings.
Car sales. We're doing all this without a dealership.
Yep, I would agree. So let's move on to property tax. This is our second largest single source of revenue for the general fund. The projection that will be included in the proposed budget is just under $8 million, so $7,991,000. This is about a $404,000 increase. 2 main things that are driving that increase. One is new construction. As you saw from the previous charts, we are adding and at the tail end of a construction boom. So we're adding $220.6 million in new construction. Also consistent with the chart you saw from sales tax, this is a downward trend. So we added about $312 million last year. To my surprise, we are adding annexation valuation this year. I didn't think that the timing was going to work out, but we can thank our county assessor's office for getting the, this is the Tanglewild annexation. So it is being added, and it has the same treatment in terms of property tax as new construction. So it does and can be added to the property tax rolls without being subject to the 1% limit. As it stands now, the proposed budget does.
Can you explain that to the general public, what that actually means?
The addition of new construction and annexation?
Yeah, because you say it isn't limited to 1%.
Sure.
What does that mean?
So these are, think of them as new taxpayers. They're brand new taxpayers that start paying property tax. And there's kind of 2 ways to look at that. When you look at property tax, the limitation is based on the city's total assessment, which is, in this case, just for illustration purposes, is the 7.9 million. So the 1% is based on that. There's kind of 2 treatments you could go forward in terms of new construction annexation. You could add the valuation to the assessment rolls, and that could not increase property tax, and it could lower the overall individual impact. Or you could add that as, like I said, like a new customer or a new taxpayer. It gets added to the assessed valuation, and these new taxpayers would just simply pay the same rate, which would be in addition to the property tax. So these 2 factors don't impact the existing base, so to speak, and that's where the 1% comes in. And listening to myself, I know that's not a great explanation. Just because
does everyone understand that? So I know that's tricky, but that is a big difference. Be able to add the new construction onto this, the 100 full amount. So the 220.6 million of new construction goes right into that 7.9 million to get Well, so then it gets spread out. Instead of that 220.6 million being capped at 1%. Geez, I'm not sure if it's a hard explanation.
It's very difficult to explain.
So I understand it, but it took me a long time to understand it as well.
It is. It's yeah. I mean, I think really the best way to think of them is new taxpayers.
New taxpayers. Yeah, there you go. And so, yeah.
So the 1% is included in the projections at this point, and we'll come back later in the workshop and ask the council's opinion whether want to continue with that. But the 1% is a limitation to property tax growth, and that is on the existing property tax. So the state law states that property tax growth of the existing tax is limited to 1%, or the implicit price deflator, whichever is less. In this case, the factor we're using is 3.86%, so we are using the 1% limitations. I also want to point out that we do have a bit of good news. Actually, I think it's great news in terms of the projection and the impact to our citizens for property tax. We are making the final payment on the 2002 fire safety bonds in December of this year. That means a principal payment will not be required next year, which means there's going to be a property tax reduction. The 2021 payment was just under $463,000, and that was allocated across the entire tax base of Lacey, and that last year equaled about 6 cents per thousand. So we're going to see about a $23 decrease to a typical home here in Lacey. I do like to show the property tax levy history. Maybe this will help further explain, this complicated tax. So when you think about, and what really this illustrates in this 10-year period is that as assessed valuation grows, so as property values grow, since we have that 1% limit, the tax rate has to go down. Otherwise, we're going to exceed that 1%. So we have been in a period of property appreciation since 2014. So we've had 9 years in a row of property increasing. We did have a decrease in 2013, which let me overlay that with 2012, which better illustrates it. So from 2012 to 2013, property values were still declining from the Great Recession. So in that case, since we had property values going down, the tax rate goes up. So there's an inverse relationship between valuation and the rate. And then you could see from 2014 going forward, the rate has continued to decline. The same goes for the voter approved bonds. As you add assessed valuation, the required debt payments gets shared by a bigger group, which causes that rate to go down. But I also want to illustrate the 2022. Again, I think this is something to celebrate. Last year, or actually 2 years ago, we saw the general levy drop below $1. I think that's pretty unheard of, certainly in our region. But we're actually I'm projecting we're going to drop below 90 cents in 2022. We're also again seeing about a 6 cent decline because of the paying off of the 2002 bonds, the fire safety bonds. And then we're seeing a decline as well to the parks bonds. So we're going to be under $1 total in terms of the general levy plus the voter approved levies.
Wow.
I mean, I've not seen that in my career, so that's certainly something worth pointing out to.
Is there another city in Washington State that has a levy that low? I mean, you're right. You have to throw the buck the $1.50 in from Lacey Fire District 3 to be a true comparison to other cities.
You do. In addition to the Lacey District 3's levy, you also have to add in the Timberland Libraries levy as well. So we're not quite comparing apples to apples. But even, I don't have the answer statewide. You know, I do take a look at certainly within Thurston County. When you add in the fire district and the library district levies, that certainly increases our overall levy in terms of our citizens compared to, say, an Olympia property owner and a Tumwater, but we're still very low in terms of being compared to our neighbors.
We have to be the lowest in Thurston County by far. So we charge our citizens less than any other place in Thurston County to live. That's a true statement.
I believe that is. Do want to show the impact to a typical home in Lacey. Believe it or not, my research shows that a median house now in Lacey is $450,000. So I used that $450,000 looking forward in 2022. I got to the $403,000 you're seeing in 2021 by taking what looks like about 11.5% increase to property values from 2020 to 2021. So I basically took out 11.5%. This is an overall reduction of just over $19.
Wow.
So let me highlight that for you. So moving from 2021, adding 11.5% appreciation, seeing the decrease, again, the inverse relationship to valuation and the rate ends up, and a combination of the fire bond levy not being carried forward, it's about a $19.03 decrease to the typical home in Lacey.
Yeah, I want to step in here too, and Mayor and Councilmember Kunkel, we did a recent conversation with council, and as you know, there's just a lot of time and effort talked about property taxes, and we talk about the nature and how they're developed and what the impact is. And you know, I think Troy stated something, and this is really the first time in my career too that I've seen a local government have their property taxes less than the previous year, and that also accounts for growth in a home value. So that's a pretty significant milestone, I think, when we talk about property taxes and how we're trying to be good stewards of our property tax dollars.
That goes to show you how much new value came onto our rolls. Number one, how we've been just a really great steward of the public dollar, and the fact that these levies, the bonds going away. I mean, all those things come together. But because you would think with the assessed value of everyone's homes going up really across the board, that you would have to see an increase. But in this case, we're actually seeing a decrease. Well, that's just amazing. That's something to be proud of.
I think there's three things at play. There's one, there's no new debt being added, so you're seeing that reduction. You are seeing the increase in assessed valuation in total. And so when you look at all those factors, that's where you are seeing that potential reduction. So you're right. That's like I said, I've not seen that here in my time with Lacey.
Troy,
Yes.
I think it's really remarkable, but just for people who may be watching this, you know, the city taxes are just a piece of the property tax bill that you would get from the county. So while ours are going down some, what is the overall tax bill going to look like for our residents in terms of it going up or down or what have you?
That's a fair question.
Sure. Well, I can't speak for the other districts, but every other district is subject to that same 1% limitation. So
Sure.
If you think about the library district, you think about Thurston County, Those entities are subject to the same 1%. So we're not going to see, unless there's a voter approved initiative in those jurisdictions, they're not going to see an increase more than 1%. The state is one that's, you think our portion is difficult to understand. The states, I have to admit, I don't understand the limitations and how the states is calculated, but that could change drastically. So I can say that a typical house or a typical property in Lacey is going to be limited to a 1% increase just because of what may happen with the state levy. I'll also point out this is an average house in Lacey. Depending on where you live exactly in Lacey, depending on the last time the county assessor actually made a site visit to your property, you could see a very different assessment change from the typical home. So again, this is based on 11.5% appreciation and valuation. Any one of us could own a home that may have grown more than that, may have grown less. So again, this is a typical home in Lacey and not necessarily going to be what an individual might see. But I think in general, property tax will not grow more than 1% outside of that state school levy.
Yeah, and that includes school. The school isn't subject to that same 1% either. Isn't that correct?
This again is going to illustrate how complicated property taxes are. So where we are not, our limitations aren't on the rate itself, which logically you would think that the school districts is based on that levy rate and not the overall levy itself. They are limited to, I believe, $2.50 in terms of their levy, plus the school district has voter approved portions of their levy and their capital bond levies as well. So, that's a good point, Mr. Merritt. That kind of falls outside of that 1% as well.
Yeah, their levy is calculated different than our levy. So if your assessed value goes up, our rate goes down. That's not the same with the schools.
That's correct.
I'd also add to the Lacey community did vote in a levy lift rate for Fire District 3. So they'll be at their maximum dollar amount at $1.50. So that would not come down. So that would also be subject to an increase. But again, that's by the direction of the community.
So I'm going to ask, and this may not be at the appropriate time, and it may not even be related, so forgive me if it seems weird, but if our levy rate has gone down to 0.95, would we add the value added tax of 1%, or would we come do it at 0.95 coming up for property tax? Or isn't it even appropriate to ask that question?
The 1% is calculated on the total collections, not the levy rate itself. And maybe I'll back up a couple slides so you can see that. So for the 1%, this year, so 2021, our levy is about $7.5 million, not this nearly 8 million you're seeing. So the 1% is calculated on 7.5. So the increased limit is $76,000.
Oh,
it's not calculated on the rate itself. So what we would do is we would take the $7.5 million in 2021. We'd apply the 1%, which is about 75,000. We would add the value of new construction annexation, which is about 400,000. So you end up with about a $500,000 increase to that. So that's how you get to the nearly 8 million. And then the levy rate is calculated based on the total assessed valuation. So you would take whatever that assessed valuation is, and you would divide this 8 million, so to speak, into that, or by that total assessed valuation. And that actually doesn't happen until next year, believe it or not. So again, another illustration of how complicated this really is. We don't know what the rate is, and we won't know until January of next year.
Okay.
What we do know is our limit will be this $7.99 million, and whatever the assessed valuation, that will be calculated next year. It'll be certified by the Board of Commissioners at the end of January or February, what that rate will actually be. That's why we don't see our property tax bills until the end of February.
Yeah, end of April, to pay in April.
Yep.
Okay.
So that calculation occurs in the year in which it's taxed, which for most of us, we want to know what the rate is going forward. And that's how most taxes are established, is based on a rate, but not property tax. It's a completely different thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me catch back up. And do you want to show the impact?
I just want to thank you, Troy. I mean, we were on the council for so many years, and we sat here and stared at this and we're like, what? I think we've done a pretty good job of explaining where we're at, than ever before. So I just want to give you some props there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a very, very, very complicated. We could probably talk 2 hours about property tax and how it's calculated and how complicated it is. So I appreciate that. So the slide on screen now is illustrating the impact of the 1% limit. So again, taking that typical Lacey home of 450,000. So at the top half of the chart, you could see again the 95 cents per thousand estimated levy with a projected total Lacey portion of the property tax bill of just over $428. And if you remove the impacts of the 1% increase, which is less than a penny, it's actually 0.8 of a penny. So calculating that out against the $450,000 house, it's about $3.73 impact to a typical home in Lacey. Okay, let's talk about some more straightforward revenue sources for the general fund. Utility tax, this is generally a 6% tax on utilities within Lacey. We're projecting a $233,000 increase, about 3.2%. Within this category, we have electricity, we have Lacey utilities, natural gas, telephone use. The two categories that are really driving this increase are electric and Lacey owned utilities. Those increases are actually offset by telephone projections. What we're seeing is, again, the shift from landline phone usage to cell phone, mobile phone usage. And we also had a private accounting change that occurred in 2000. I think it was actually 2020, and it changed the way cell phone or mobile phone bundles are valued. So there is a nationwide prohibition on utility tax on data. So we cannot tax internet data. And if you think the nature of mobile phones now, I know my own usage, I use very little voice. In terms of my bundle, it's mostly text and data. So that is reflected in the valuation or our ability to tax those mobile phones. So it's heavily weighed towards data now. So, we're seeing a pretty sharp declines in utility tax because of that. B&O tax, this is also another significant source of revenue for the city. This really follows the trend line of sales tax. It's nearly the same base as sales tax. So, what we're seeing in terms of an increase in sales tax is being reflected here in B&O tax. So about a $445,000 increase being projected here. Other taxes, which are primarily gambling and emissions tax, these are a couple areas that we're not seeing a recovery from the pandemic. In fact, emissions tax, we're projecting at $84,000 for 2022. Our pre-pandemic level was about $225,000. Gambling tax, we're projecting just under 240,000. Our pre-pandemic level was about 415,000. So these are definitely two examples within our local economy that aren't seeing a recovery. Parks and recreation fees. Do want to point out that we are projecting something close to our pre-pandemic levels, coming in at about $893,000. Our actual collections from Parks and Rec fees were just over $940,000 in 2019. This is an area that we need to keep an eye on. We are being impacted still by the pandemic in terms of these activities within the city. The good news is if we're not seeing those if we're still seeing those limitations, or if we see another wave of COVID this later this year and into next year, the expenditures kind of go hand in hand with the revenues. So we won't be incurring a lot of expenditures if we do see a drop off here in these revenues, but we definitely need to keep an eye on these activities. Also, I want to point out a significant change in our engineering and parks maintenance fees, and we'll get into the reasons why a little bit later in the workshop, but we are projecting over a $500,000 increase in this area. And primarily what's in these fees are professional service fees for design and construction management for the city's capital improvement programs. And we, as you know, we are headed into a very large capital improvement programs for water and sewer. And we're going to need that administrative support to keep those projects moving forward. And again, you'll see that a little later in the presentation, but this increase is a reflection that those projects will indeed pay for these increased expenditures. Do want to share the state shared revenues. Not a lot of change. So liquor excise tax, we're seeing about a $54,000 increase. Liquor revolving fund, about a $9,000 increase. And then marijuana enforcement, we're seeing a $23,000 increase. These are primarily growing because of our population growth is growing faster than the average city in Lacey. So these are distributed on a per capita basis. So really just an indication we're growing faster than most cities. Want to touch a little bit on utility rates. We spent a lot of time here during the middle of 2021 talking about these rates. So I won't spend a lot of time here. The council, of course, authorized a mid-year increase to utility rates based on this very thing we're seeing here on screen in terms of what these utilities are going to require in terms of revenues to maintain the operations and the maintenance of our systems, as well as pay for those very large capital improvement programs. So we'll be asking you again here at the end of our conversation here about these multi-year rate ordinances that we hope you will consider later this fall. So a 5.25% increase for water for the years 2022 through 27. I will remind the council that your action here at mid-year actually decreased this annual increase down from 6.5%. So without that mid-year adjustment, we would be before you proposing a 6.5% increase. Similar to the time period for water, a multi-year increase for sewer of 9.5%. Again,
Troy,
yes.
Can you back up and say that again about the increase? Can you explain that a little more, please?
Sure. So for water and sewer specifically, we presented multi-year increases for the utilities, and the council saw the impact that was going to have over this period, and took action on a 5% mid-year, so July 1st effective date, a rate increase for water and sewer. prior to that action, the revenue requirement study showed that water rates needed to increase 6.5%. So that mid-year action dropped the revenue need for water down to 5.25%. So the impact of that was a 1.25% per year decrease. In terms of the sewer rates, the projection prior to the council action was 10.5% annual increases. So the action the council took mid-year dropped that a full 1%. So instead of 10.5, now a 9.5% increase for this 6-year period. We didn't spend
our septic to sewer rate in there.
That's correct. So that does include, fortunately, in my opinion, it does include the septic to sewer conversions. We spent a lot of time talking about an additional rate for that, but that is also included within this annual increase. So, actually, I think that's great news as well, because we were afraid that was going to be significant rate increases just for that program alone, but that is included in these rate increases. And then on the stormwater rate increase, of 4.5%, we didn't spend a lot of time this year talking about that. The comp plan was actually adopted for stormwater back in November of 2020, which did include this 4.5% increase, but we've been only taking action on an annual basis. So while we're considering the water and sewer rates increases, multi rate increases, it makes sense to adopt the 4.5% increases that are included in the adopted stormwater plan.
And I'd just like to point out here too, is I know you're projecting out to 2027, in some of these cases in 2025, but our rates are really based on our capital improvement plans. And of course, what happens to the utilities during the year. And so as we bring on new sewer customers and new water customers, as we, as population grows, especially when we do the septic to sewer conversions, that should almost act like a levy rate, because we're spreading it across more people, right? More people are paying into the system. And so I do hope that we take a chance and come back almost on an annual basis and see what our rates are at and compare to the revenues and expenses and possibly adjust those as needed.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mr. Mayor. What's not really illustrated when we talk about rates is the amount of debt service that these funds could incur as well. And what we've done in past practice is, in those instances where growth exceeds what was included in the analysis, we've simply lowered the amount of debt that's required for these utilities. But yeah, we could certainly look at that.
Do these rates include the two major population increases? Because our population has increased way more than what we projected it to be when we set out with this. I mean, you're talking about a population of 52,000 when we're projecting a population of 58,000.
Well, unfortunately for utilities, we're already serving those customers. So let's use Cap City as an example. Our first septic sewer conversion project, they were already water customers. In fact, for the water utility, we actually see a decrease in revenue as we annex existing customers, because we have a 20% surcharge on outside of city limit customers. So when they come into the city, they actually get the benefit of not having that 20% surcharge. So that actually reduces water utility revenues when we annex.
Fair point.
It kind of has an opposite impact. But But to your point, we do take a conservative look at population growth as we move forward. We do want to ensure that the rates will, cover our needs in terms of operations. And as you pointed out, the real driver behind rates, the capital improvement program, we want to make sure that we're going to have those dollars. So we do make sure that we are conservative. But again, I think that will be an offset to the amount of debt that would be required to build those projects. So in terms of dollar impact to our customers, I've translated those percentage increases to what a typical resident might experience in terms of the increases. Also included here on the slide is the lot portion of the bill. So we're looking at about a $5.57 total increase. Looking at the 2021 increase, that was $4.27, so a little bit higher than what our typical customers experience this year. Okay, well, let's move to the other side of our budget and talk about expenditures. You can't talk about general fund expenditures without talking about the cost of labor. You've heard me say this several times. The mayor has said the same thing several times. Our most important asset is our employees, but they're also the most expensive. So looking at general fund salaries, so based on 2021 salaries, I wanted to illustrate the impact on a 1% increase. So if you combine salary and benefits, every 1% of increase we see to salaries and benefits is about $300,000. If we look at total budget, we get into the $400,000 range per 1%. So in terms of salary and wages, we are at the end of 2021, we'll have our two largest bargaining group contracts expire. So there is a level of uncertainty in terms of the cost of labor coming up in 2022. I did want to show, just to help illustrate and maybe put things into perspective, I do want to show what was in the 2021 adjustment for our two largest groups. So AFSCME is our largest group in terms of number of employees. The 2021 adjustment to salaries was 90% of the Seattle Consumer Price Index. If that were the settlement going forward in 2022, that factor that would be used would be 3.3%. If we look at our second largest contract, which is our uniform police or police officers guild, again, it expires at the end of the year. The 2021 adjustment for this contract was 100% of that same factor that we talked about earlier, plus 0.5%. And it had a little bit different minute max. So I'm again using that 3.3% as an indicator that could be what we're going to experience. We do have two contracts that are under contract for 2022. So our Senior Police Management Association, it is going to be 90% of the Seattle CPIU for June to June. It does have a minimum of 2%, maximum of 4%. That factor in 2021 was 5.5%. So we're looking at a 4% adjustment for this group. And then our final labor group is the Police Management Association, and it for 2022 has just a fixed 2% increase for next year. I do want to run through the benefits that benefit changes we're going to see in 2022. And we are going to see a reduction in our PERS contributions. This is a almost 2.75% decrease. I believe this is a budget balancing move by the state. So these are rates that are established by the state legislature. So that's good news for us in the short term. If this truly is a budget balancing effort, there may be catch-up increases in the future. I really think that's what we're seeing. If you look at the 12.97% for 2020, you might remember during the Great Recession that we saw significant decreases to the contributions, and I do believe this was part of that catch-up. We do have adopted rate increases for insurance. Regions will be 5.8% for 2022. About 60% of our employee base is signed up for Regions. Kaiser is going to have a 7.3% increase, and the remaining 40% of our employee base uses Kaiser insurance. Dental is going to have a 2% increase for Delta and a actually reduction of over 10% for Willamette Dental. No change to vision. We do have labor and industry rates. These are our workers' comp insurance rates. We're actually seeing we're going to see a 3.1% increase. This is actually the first overall increase for L&I rates in 5 years. And then we do have changes within categories of employees. So there's going to be a shift or an increase to public works and parks employee benefits of 1% and police of 2%. Do you want to talk about major initiatives? I think we have a budget that we are presenting to you that matches both what I think are council initiatives going forward, also addressing some mandates, some changes that we've seen at the legislative level. So within the proposed budget, you're going to see a $2 million proposal to continue on with the police station land acquisition and site development. In all reality, I think this is going to be $5 million for 2022. So you'll remember in our budget amendments last month, we included $3 million so we could start the process, but it's probably unlikely we would actually close on any sort of property during that period. So fully expect that we'll carry that monies over and it'll be $5 million total for this project. There is over $800,000 in the budget for body worn cameras. This is really in reaction to a legislative change that requires the filming of certain police interactions. So we have a capital cost of $500,000 for that equipment and an ongoing cost of over $300,000 per year. You'll also see a little bit later on, we have some workforce considerations directly related to this program. We do have over $2.3 million in improvements proposed for the regional athletic complex. So about $2.3 million to construct an expansion to the rec parking lot. This will be the graveled area that fronts Stillicum. So we're going to pave that next year. And getting started on the phase 3 preliminary design. So this is the property that's across the street from the main rec area. We will be including $300,000 total for economic development, strategic investment. Not really defined, but one example that we may consider is permanent investments in the food truck site there at the Lacey Depot. But really, we just wanted to have a holding place for council in terms of those investments and as those opportunities arise throughout the year.
So are you just taking this from our economic development fund?
That's correct. So there's a $2.5 million reserve for this purpose. Of course, if something, another opportunity were to arise, we could always amend the budget, but we definitely want to have a holding place for the council. We have about $260,000 in the proposed budget to address climate action plan, 60,000 of which really is to complete the plan. This will come forward in either a part-time position to help finish this plan, or perhaps we'll partner with one of our neighboring jurisdictions or some other services contract to get this plan done. And then there is $200,000 for the actual implementation, or at least the start of that implementation. And we have reserves for both of these as well. Included in the proposed budget will be continuing to put security cameras in our parks, as well as a couple of community buildings. So $303,000, and we do have council committed reserves for that exact type of project. Do want to talk about initiatives and carryovers that we see coming forward in 2022. In terms of a carryover, we have about $464,000 for Midtown investment. You might remember this from about 3 years ago. This was a economic development initiative. I think we started with $500,000 for this project. So that will be carried over. So that will be available for those investments in Midtown. The budget does continue on with the council's neighborhood grant program. So $60,000 is being maintained. We had $25,000 to continue our focus on equity. So $25,000 for that commission. It does maintain our police succession planning. As a reminder to the council and the audience, we do have reserves established to basically carry 3 police officer positions. We're seeing a high level of turnover in our police department from basically retirements, and it's an acknowledgement that it takes a long time to get an officer through the academy. So we wanted to be able to position ourselves to really not see a drop off in police services. And then included in the arterial street budget is $200,000 for the design of the Midtown access and a 7th and College roundabout design. And there'll be a lot more discussion revolving around this project in terms of developer agreements and exactly how we're going to move forward with that actual construction. Do want to highlight the Transportation Benefit District plans for next year. This is an expanded program, so it's $4.5 million. What we've found is that we're collecting more in terms of sales tax, so we're using the same basis for the collection in that voter approved sales tax for transportation improvement projects. So we do have the ability to have a more robust plan going into 2022. Rather than read through the list, I'll show you a quick map. I won't get into all the details, but we're really focusing on South Lacey next year. We were in Northeast Lacey currently this year, so we're going to be looking at kind of the Midtown area as well as South Lacey. There are a couple of projects in Northeast Lacey in terms of what we're seeing on Marvin Road. We're going to redo a couple of sections of Marvin Road where we haven't touched in a few years. Do you want to talk about utilities capital budget?
I thought we were going to do some major repairs on some sidewalks this next year in the Transportation Benefit District as well.
That's thank you for that reminder, Mayor. There is $250,000 in the transportation improvement fund. So actually the total expenditure budget is going to be about 4.75. So thank you for that. That was, definitely something that the council wanted to focus on as well. And I think Deputy Mayor Pratt really led that charge in terms of improving sidewalks.
Yes, very happy about that too.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. Utility capital. These are very significant programs that we're about to undertake. Actually, it's more of a continuation, but we're going to see some pretty big dollars flow through capital projects. So when we look at the 2021 through 2029 capital improvement program, water is programmed to spend $161 million. So we're going to really ramp that up in 2022. I won't go through all the projects, but about $25 million in water projects next year. It's a combination of growth projects in terms of adding reservoirs, but there's a lot of regulation that's in here too. When you look at these pH projects, I mean, that's regulation. So we're addressing a lot of different needs within these capital programs, a combination of growth, regulation, as well as rehabilitation of an aging system. Sewer, again, a significant program for the 2021 through 2029 period. Not as significant as water, but still $52 million over that period. The 2022 program is about $12 million. We're seeing just an aging system, so a lot of rehabilitation of lift stations that's going to start in 2022. We do have a capital improvement program for stormwater, much smaller scale, but no less important in terms of water quality and protection of our resources. About a $1.5 million capital program for stormwater next year. Our transportation plan is a little bit smaller for 2022, but still moving forward. So included in this $3.8 million budget for transportation is design work on a College Street extension. We did receive I believe a $1 million grant to construct that. So that's been a long time goal of the council. We do have some work on 10th Avenue in the Woodland area, or the Midtown, area. And we do have some placeholder monies in there for transportation right-of-way acquisition. Really, these are opportunities that we want to be able to take advantage of as properties come up for sale. It's just a better situation for us to buy properties that are needed when we have a willing seller. So we want to be in position for those opportunities as they come up. And then I want to talk a little bit about our fleet. This is, despite the fact that it's $1 million in terms of replacement of new vehicles, this is actually a more typical level of replacement. We replaced very few vehicles this year in the 2021 budget. So this is going to look like an increase, but really this is getting back to what, again, I would call a more historic level in terms of replacement and new vehicles. Do want to talk about social services and homelessness. This is, it's becoming a major department for our city. So do want to focus some time here. In terms of direct services for homelessness, we have $100,000 for shelter resources in the budget. Again, our focus in terms of veterans and services to our military, about $55,000. And then we have $245,000, so a total of $400,000 for really some miscellaneous initiatives. And we wanted to have, again, placeholder for those opportunities or as those needs arise. So $400,000 just in homelessness line items. We are continuing with our rapid response cleanup team. This is about a $216,000 budget item. This is really to help clean up some of those areas around the city as those needs occur. We do have a 0.5% of sales tax going to the Regional Housing Council, which was formerly HHSC, so about $68,000 going there. 2022 continues with the mobile outreach team. This is an agreement with Olympic Health and Recovery Services. It's a 4-person team that is out there 7 days a week that are helping with various health, mental health issues and behavioral health issues that are out there. We are including $50,000 for cold weather shelter. It's hard to believe it's already October and we're heading into our cold, rainy days. And then we do have a placeholder for affordable housing, and this is the sales tax that's related to the $1,406. This is really a credit against the state share sales tax going into housing. This council has committed 2 years worth of this sales tax for the project on Martin Way. I think Councilmember Cox mentioned this a little bit earlier, the Unity Commons Phase 2 project. So there is a projected shortfall in that project. That particular council, or maybe it's the Low Income Housing Institute, can't remember which, are seeking out federal grants to make up for that shortfall. But in the event that those funds aren't able to be secured, the region has committed tax dollars to make up for that shortfall. And then just one more slide for me before I turn over to the city manager. I did want to point out that the budget does not include any consideration for the American Rescue Plan Act funds that the city is receiving. So we're receiving a total of about $6.8 million, of which we actually have in hand half of that, so $3.4 million. The second half of that will be received about mid-2022. You know, we do know that the council is going to be considering and having robust discussions on this, but the actual federal rules have not been established. We do have interim rules in place, but the final rule is still pending. So our proposal is to really address, you know, this going forward in terms of amending the budget when we finally know the final rules and what council chooses to do with those funds. So I will take a break here in speaking and turn this over to the city manager to talk about workforce considerations.
Thank you, Troy. Troy's going to advance the slides for me, but as we discuss about the impact on the budget, as we all know, workforce is our largest expenditure. It represents about 60% of the general fund historically. But I want to identify kind of what we've done in 2021, just as a reminder for council. We added a position in the Community and Economic Development Department. I was a Planning and Development Services Manager. We needed an additional resource at our utility billing front counter. So we created a limited term employment opportunity. So we have a DA that is operating in that capacity. And then the 2 park aid technicians are really the 2 positions we added for our rapid response cleanup team. And so those are now actively working in our community to, I think, the benefit and exceeding expectations of everyone. So going to 2022, we've identified 13 positions that we're going to add to our workforce. And I just want to summarize what we're looking at. So we're going to add 2 community service officers within our police department. They provide a very strong functional support role to the police department, such as transporting prisoners from where they're being picked up into Nisqually Jail, also helping at community events. And so we have 2 of those in the budget. Troy mentioned that we have money in the budget for succession planning. And so we're going to upgrade one of those officers to a sergeant so we can have better oversight of our community resource unit program, our mobile outreach team, and also help coordinate when we're talking about homeless response. So that's a neat thing. Just kind of as a reminder for council, we have 61 budgeted positions for our police department. We have 60, I'll say, on site. One of those is at the Criminal Justice Training Center, but that's still within our budget. And we have 3 additional overhires that we'll be able to hopefully anticipate, again, those retirements. But as Troy pointed out too, we're already behind. We're trying to do catch up in terms of filling those budget positions. As also mentioned before, we are having a commitment to a body worn camera program. And with that, you have additional expenses in time and personnel. We are going to include an IT specialist to help with just the mechanics of actually having the servers and also the recording of all the video that comes with a body worn camera program. That will be in the information services department, but it'll be really dedicated solely to police department functions. Plus the police department added about, I'll say 50 plus mobile devices in this current fiscal year. So we're taking care of that. The other part of it too, as with the body worn camera program, we're subject to public records request, and a big portion of the impact is really going to be a record specialist. And so we are going to need to hire an additional personnel to handle those public records requests as they come in. Next slide. So as you know, we have been doing a lot of projects, and anytime that we do a project, we need a number of engineers in terms of the inspection side, as well as the civil engineer side and project administration. So we are adding another inspector, which is from a formal title in Engineering Tech 3 to assist with all those capital projects, not just from the utility side, but also the general fund side. We've just got to the size now, there's enough activity if it happens to be, you know, installing an art project to talking about a future public safety facility. We need really civil engineers to manage those capital facilities projects and park projects. In past time, we'd have a director do it. We just don't have the capacity. We're actually getting to the point now, there's enough frequency and projects that are outlined really from now until say 20 years that we just need someone to actually have the expertise, do the bidding requirements correctly. And so we need another civil engineer in that project. Project engineer is really focused on all the transportation construction projects that we have. We just need the capacity to be able to help monitor and do all the requirements when it comes to using grants from either the fed level or the state level. And then the two civil engineers are really in response to, really, we have 3 years of almost $30 million in capital improvements within our utilities. And so that will be sorely needed. Next slide. In terms of general fund, again, we're getting to a stage in the evolution of our organization that we need a grant expert on staff. Now with the ARPA funds and trying to monitor $6.8 million, I think there's also missed opportunities because we don't have someone solely focused on grants. And so we are going to use this position. It will be housed in the finance department. And we think we'll need that. If we ever in the future go to a CDBG program, it would also just speak to the fact that we need a specialized person to monitor our grants. We've identified a civil engineer to our stormwater program that will be supported by rates. So that's another addition. And then as we talk about just our utility systems in general, they're getting more complex. We need to hire another water department, electrician type position or control tech. We're doing a pH facility. We have 2 more identified in the coming years. We do know we have some retirements, and so this is almost a succession position that we need to identify. We've also identified a journey level maintenance technician. Obviously, public or workplace safety is a high priority for the city of Lacey. We've been pulling people away to address those needs, and in doing so, we've left a position short in journey level maintenance technician, or sorry, the wastewater M&O department. So we're going to backfill that. So those are the 13 positions that we identified. We typically try to show you this picture. If you can advance the next slide. This is sort of to show the accountability we have to the community and to council when we talk about hiring. Again, if we go to our official population of just under 55,000, so 54,780, in 2022, if you add these positions in, we're about 5.53 employees per thousand. So you can look at the historical trend line of where we're at. It's obviously not the highest. We gained a little bit of ground from 2021. But if you go to the next slide, and we point this out at a finance committee meeting, if you add in our 2 recent annexations, we're really at a population of about 57,347. So that kind of drops down. But this gives you a historical perspective in terms of what our staffing levels are to serve the community. This is assuming that we had every position that was currently filled, which we don't. But that shows you what the level per thousand would be serving our community. So just as a kind of a quick budget summary, I kind of want to point out maybe I'll say 4 themes. And this kind of sounds like a very economic or a banker statement, but I would argue to council that we do have the financial capacity in the short term to respond to the current economic uncertainty, which if there's one thing, and I've always talked to council about this, my job is to ensure that council has enough time when there's issues of economic uncertainty or we have crises, that we have the time and flexibility to make better decisions. And we do have reserves to be able to, for us to be able to accomplish those goals. So I think that puts us in a good financial position, at least in the short term. Secondly, this is really a significant year that we're going to be investing in water and wastewater infrastructure. And that's reason why we have those rate proposals for the next coming years. So again, the majority of that infrastructure is not related to growth. It's actually related to M&O as well as mandatory regulations. And so that is a big part of this budget. The other one too, we just need to recognize the fact, and it was in 2019 that we started to include a social services tab within our budget to recognize what our investment is into social services, because it was really kind of hard to identify. We're doing a better job, but I will point out the fact that we're about 1.2 million in this proposed budget that we'll be investing in social services. And that really doesn't account for council's time, I would say Rick's time in community economic development, or my time and others when it comes to trying to respond to social service issues that we have been facing here for the last 2 years. But in terms of you compared this to other departments, it would be a larger department, it would not be the least funded department. And then again, I think we're trying to respond to growth and service demands, regulations, and unfunded mandates. And we'll continue to try to really balance the demands of the community as well as trying to meet our obligations that either may be statutory mandated or even federally mandated. But I do believe we have a good budget going into 22. I believe it meets the priorities that the council set out, and we're making a significant investment into the community.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Now we'd like to get some direction from the council, just to make sure that the budget that we propose and put together and present to you and the public meet the needs and your expectations and certainly your goals and vision for the city. So the first 3 slides are really going to be related to the positions that Scott just went through. We just want to check in with council. Obviously there's significant investment in our, like I said, our most important asset, but we just want to check in with council and make sure that the addition of the 13 positions is acceptable for you all.
Let me say thumbs up. Yep.
Okay. Again, continuing with the positions, which I think your indicates okay. I do want to check in just to, you know, we do plan on presenting multi-year rate ordinances to the council and really consistency with what we talked about at mid-year with your increases that you implemented July 1st. Again, the stormwater rate that's being proposed here for this multi-year period is consistent with the adopted comp plan for stormwater. The water rate is consistent with the comp plan that you will see next year. So you should see that, and it should be made public in, I think, the first quarter, maybe second quarter of 2022. We'll go through that process. And then wastewater, that comp plan actually isn't due for a couple of years, but we did have the consultant take a look at that just kind of for consistency and predictability. So I just want to check in with council and make sure that we're on track and bringing multi-year ordinances before you.
So I know you're saying multi-year here, but next budget cycle, aren't you going to check in and with these with the rates? I mean, all we can really do is approve next year's rate. Isn't that true?
Well, we're presenting something a little bit different than that, Mr. Mayor. We're proposing that we bring multi-year rates that are included in the LMC. That doesn't mean that the council can't, you know, reopen that and reconsider that if the assumptions are off and there could be downward adjustments. But we are truly asking that you include in the ordinance that will be presented and hopefully adopted. It will include rates that are set for the next 6 years, and in the case of stormwater, 4-year period.
So we're missing 2 council members here. And I mean, I'm not really comfortable on this when we're talking about a multi-year rate. I'm not really comfortable giving you a thumbs up or thumbs down without the full council weighing in specifically on this. I hope you can understand that, because we've never done this before. We've never held future councils to a decision that we're making with this council. So I just feel like I would like the other two council members here to weigh in on that before we go forward.
So we're scheduled to come before Finance Committee at the end of this month with this very issue. We could certainly, obviously, it's for the council to decide. Do you want to continue the multi-year discussion at Finance Committee, or do you want to bring this back before the full council? I mean, how would you like to do that?
Yeah, I would like the full council to be able to weigh in on this. And without the full council here, I feel a little uncomfortable with that. I'm not sure where the rest of the council is at.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Mayor. And my follow-up question is, if we don't have consensus, we do have an opportunity to shift that budget and change it out, or are we committing to something that's going to last 3 to 5 years without any further discussion or revision that the council may choose and want to do?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we haven't seen this before. So these rates wouldn't come before future councils?
Unless the council wants to reopen it.
Hey, Deputy Mayor, you got something?
Well, I was going to say, we make amendments all the time to the budget. So this is just a budget setting kind of exercise. So I wouldn't think it would necessarily lock you in all the time anyway.
Well, I think they are looking to have some concrete understanding of our budget moving forward. And I think it would be problematic, to the mayor's point, if we don't have the full council on board with this big decision, it could create some serious, problems, a year or two down the road. We don't know what the next council is going to look like, and that could, cause a challenge for the staff and everyone else. Yeah.
Scott, can you tell me this? Can you tell me what the philosophy is behind the multi-year rate?
So I believe when we spoke with you in midsummer, we did address this issue about doing a multi-year rate, and that was contingent upon us having to borrow less money. So the rates are assuming if you adopt a multi-rate, that allows you to achieve that goal. And at that time, council was supportive of that idea. Obviously, we went out to the public and had a public meeting. I guess what we could do is obviously just assume this is in the budget. You're going to have the same discussion at the revenue hearing. That's your opportunity to kind of weigh in and make a final decision. But as we addressed and identified, we have multiple years that we're pushing $30 million in capital construction. We have done multi-rates before in the past. I believe we did a 5-year multi-rate, maybe 6 years. And so that could have transcended, council members' terms, but it's more of just the philosophy of, we know we have large capital expenditures in the future. When we make a commitment to those, at some point, if we have to borrow debt, we need to have some assurance to bondholders that when we sell those at the market, that there's a guarantee they'll be paid back. And so that's really the philosophy of having a multi-rate. But we definitely can have this discussion again at the revenue hearing.
I would like to have the discussion again at the revenue hearing and be able to explain to the council members that aren't here that I totally understand giving security to the bond holders, right? If we're gonna go out for debt, I understand that. I'm a little hesitant to ever commit a future council to what this council is agreeing on. I know they might have done that in the past, but I would at least like a yearly check back in to see where expenditures at, where, and then look at the rate. I'm very uncomfortable about multi-year rates. Deputy Mayor?
how do you plan for capital projects that are going to be enormous if we don't have something like a more predictability built in? That if we do it per year, that doesn't help with these huge projects.
I don't mind projecting a multi-year rate, but I still think it's the responsibility of each council to then approve that rate for that year.
Agreed.
And so
yeah.
I'm not saying this isn't the right rate, and it wouldn't be the right rate the following year and the year after that. What I'm saying is I am uncomfortable telling next year's council that this is what your rate is based on this year.
Wouldn't you be doing that with every thumbs up thing we're going to be making?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, not necessarily. I guess this is where my fiscal conservatism sort of kicks in a little bit. I'm not saying that's the wrong rate. I'm not saying it's the wrong rate 3 years from now. I'm just saying I'm uncomfortable setting a rate that a future council doesn't have any say on.
If maybe I just want to share a screen just real quick and just to provide a little bit of context of why a multi-rate is being proposed. And if you can, you should be able to see that screen now.
Yeah.
So again, this just speaks to the fact that we have identified long-term capital improvements which would justify a multi-rate increase. I just want to provide that slide. I know it's, again, we talked about it during the summer, but it's just worth kind of highlighting. Again, 2022, you're looking over 30 million. Same thing in 2023. And even in the outer years, you're looking at still $20+ million capital expenditures.
And I would agree with that, right? But I still think it is the responsibility of every council to take that information. That's just where I'm coming in at. Again, I'm happy to have this full conversation with the council. That's why it's so important that we have the full council be able to convey this. Councilmember Cox?
I can see your point on having the full council be here to make the decision, but I would ask that part of that conversation, we get information from Troy and Scott and perhaps Scott Egger on what the consequences are. Because if
Fair enough.
I think we just need to really make an informed choice on this.
So I understand that if for some reason we didn't do a multi-year rate, if it caused the cost of our bonds to be more expensive, I'm okay. I'd like to hear the argument, but I think we need some more conversations. When we were talking about multi-year rates, we've talked about sort of, I think maybe I just missed that when we had that conversation this summer, because that's just not something we've ever, I don't think I've ever been a part of before. So I just feel like we need to talk this through a little bit.
And I was under the understanding that we were going to talk about it. I mean, not just commit to a multi-year. I thought each council was going to make that decision when it was appropriate to do so. We're being asked to make a decision for what could be a completely different council 3 to 5 years from now. I don't think that's just not a legitimate way to do business.
That's
so quick question. If we do come back and talk about this at either the finance committee or in some other, whether a work session or council, could you put what that actually means in dollars to a average household income? Because I visually have to see the money, not the rate kind of a thing.
Yeah. So I agree. I think we need to talk. I think we need to provide some more. Councilor Miller, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Well, I remember seeing the projections this summer, and I remember seeing the cost of not making the increases that were projected, and I don't remember saying, hey, we'll make a multi-year commitment, but I think that it was always kind of that's the direction we're headed, so that we don't have to as much debt to service in future years. If I remember the presentation at that time, I do want to have some more discussion about this. I think that's going to be important. A lot of those dollars that are going to be collected, are going to, be paid out to, places like Lot, and so on and so forth. And, we still, I think what I'm hearing is, we still want to look at, their numbers, and their productivity and their efficiency. And there's just other variables that need to be looked at a time when we shift from one rate to another. Mm-hmm. And so I can understand that. And with two guys gone, I'd like to, have those guys weigh in on it too.
Well, and I understand our capital improvement plan is the biggest factor, right? That determines our rate. However, there's a lot of other things, a lot of other factors that can determine a rate too. We could have extremely hot summer, right? That would bring a lot more consumption in, that would bring in a lot more revenue. Or we could have a very wet, there's a lot of things out there. That's why it's so hard to project 3-4 years from now. And now I guess we can project a little bit according to our capital improvement plan, but that's also saying that those projects are actually get done every single year without a hitch as well. And that's hard to predict 3-4 years from now as well. So I just think that all needs to go into be talked about a little bit more.
So welcome to the debate. It's good that you're scrutinizing the rates. That's the role of council. And again, I think just for our process, it would still make sense to present as if those rates were going forward, and we can have the same discussion in the public hearing process.
Yeah, however you want to do it. I just feel like the rest of the council needs to be brought up to date on that.
Can I re-ask the question, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
Is the council supportive of the rate? Let me share my screen again so you don't have to try to memorize the numbers. Is the council okay with 2022 rates being 5.25%, 9.5%, 4.5%, with a discussion to follow for consideration for a multi-year rate?
So I'm great with 2022. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. We'll bring that forward.
when we talked about this, it was at that time that we got to see what the average bill per consumer would look like. Is that something that we could also take a look at when we start to discuss this a little bit, when we take a deeper dive into this? Because I know that 5.25%, to me, that as a percentage, it seems high, but I know that could be 35 cents. Yeah. But I in 9.5% of wastewater could be something in the neighborhood of 12 cents. I don't know what it looks like to the average resident, and I don't know how to explain it to them using a percentage.
Sure. Yeah. No, we could bring certainly comparisons to other utilities, bring forward information that gives the public an idea of how, what impact it may have on them. So yeah, we could certainly put together a whole package of information for the council to consider.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to throw a big monkey wrench in there, but I just.
Well, our job is
doing this for a while, and this is a new one for me. So.
And I'm definitely not trying to make you work harder. I know you work hard.
No worries. If you're not comfortable with something, it's our job to make sure that you are. So, not a problem.
Thank
you. Final question is, as I stated, the property tax projection as it is in the proposed budget does include the 1%. Want to check in with council to see supportive or not as we move forward.
Yes.
Oh. Didn't that come out to 25 cents per house last year?
Our property taxes are going down next year.
$3. Well, yes.
per house per month.
So the
ballpark.
The typical house will see a reduction because of the fire bonds being paid off, an overall reduction of $19. But this 1% impact is about $3.75. So, but overall net decrease of $19.
Awesome.
Okay. Is that it?
I think so. So I would like
to. I do actually have a question real quick. So if there is an overall reduction of $19 and those percentages is there some balance there, or are the residents still winning, the financial battle?
No matter what we do, it's going to go down next year.
Are you talking about a combination with the utility rate increase?
Yeah, I just was wondering, if I'd like to see the people win, but also nobody wants the level of service to change or get worse.
What about $6 increase, Troy, with utilities? So there'd still be a net positive?
Yeah, it's $5.57 for a typical utility increase. So net that against the $19, it's still $13.50, give or take.
We're going down there.
Yeah, I can when asked, I can present that. I can answer that, and I can say, hey, there's a net positive here. But with just looking at percentages, I don't know how to address that. And if I try to explain that to my neighbors or anybody else who asks me, it's just going to be.
People think about dollars. They don't think about percentage, really.
Well, no, it's good to keep the cumulative effect to our residents in mind. I mean, you can't really talk about one without the other. So that's a great point.
Exactly. And when we look at your slide, Troy, it looks like your water, sewer, and stormwater bill is going up 20%. And that's scary.
Yeah.
But, when you can put the actual fiscal impact to the individual to it, it tells a much better story.
If it helps council, the $19 savings would offset at least 3 years worth of a multi-rate adjustment.
Well, I appreciate that. Okay, thank you. I think we're at the end of our agenda, and I appreciate you letting me chime in there. I really do feel like I don't know why I was caught off guard by the multi-year rate discussion. For somehow I missed that. Even we were talking about this summer. So I just want to make sure the rest of the council is totally on board with that and understands that. And, and so.
Well, maybe I'll take some credit for that. I think we talked about doing a 1-year adjustment, but then after that meeting with council and we were trying to reduce overall debt in the long term, the multi-rate thing became more attractive. So if that makes sense.
Okay, well, we'll blame you then, Scott.
There you go.
Okay, we've reached the end of our agenda. I guess I'll call this meeting adjourned. And as always, you guys keep it classy, Lacey. We'll see you. Thanks. Yep.